Very privileged to welcome Secretary General Helga Schmidt. We are also pleased to be joined by the Secretary of the Security Council of Armenia, Armen Grigoryan. I look forward to their thoughts on the role of the OSCE in addressing conflicts. Their addresses will be followed by a debate. We will first hear an address by Secretary General Schmidt. Madam Secretary General, thank you very much for joining us today. Your presence today illustrates our great cooperation. I know our members are eager to hear from you. Madam Secretary General, you have the floor. Do I stay here or go over there? Over there.
President Kauma, dear Pia, Secretary General Montella, distinguished members of the Parliamentary Assembly, Excellencies and colleagues. Can you hear me? Is it working now? Okay, so I start again. So, President Kauma, dear Pia, dear Secretary General, dear Roberto, distinguished members of the Parliamentary Assembly, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is my real privilege to be here in Yerevan today to address the autumn meeting of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. The OSCE Parliamentary Assembly represents a key link between the citizens of the OSCE and the people we are all here to serve, and the work of this very important organization. And as the security situation within the OSCE continues to face a broad range of challenges, this connection has been more vital than ever. As you're all aware, the OSCE finds itself at a critical juncture. Conflict, humanitarian crisis, and increased political discord have affected security and stability across the OSCE region, impacting all OSCE participating states and posing threats to our societies, our economies, and our futures. And in the face of these security challenges across the OSCE region, our organization and its work has never been more essential. We all know that the OSCE was founded during the Cold War. It was referred to it earlier. Tensions were high, and the need for confidence-building measures between states was great. The OSCE was created to serve as a forum for dialogue across the political, military, economic, environmental, and the very important human aspects of security, giving states a platform where disagreements could be openly discussed and prospects for cooperation could be explored. This role is as indispensable today as it was when the Helsinki Final Act was signed. But we are, of course, more than just a forum for dialogue. We are actively engaged in helping participating states address the security challenges they face, from organized crime and corruption to climate change, from human trafficking to intolerance and discrimination. And although we face significant financial constraints with no agreed budget since 2021, we operate within a deeply challenging political climate, because all of that, notwithstanding all of that, the OSCE continues to stand and deliver upon its mandates. We play a meaningful role in helping to support inclusive, sustainable solutions that enhance security for all. This work and the value it brings to participating states is visible from the halls of the Hofburg to the streets of Sarajevo. Our field missions, the Secretariat, and the independent institutions all work to support governments and the people of the OSCE region through tailor-made projects. And let me also thank all of you, because the support of the Parliamentary Assembly across this work is tremendously valuable. For instance, and here in the South Caucasus, of course, I also want to pay tribute to Armenia for their warm hospitality and for organizing this important event. So here in the South Caucasus, among a number of activities, we are fostering cross-border cooperation among neighboring communities in northern Armenia and southern Georgia to reduce, for example, the risk of wildfires. And through the Geneva international discussions dealing with the consequences of the 2008 war in Georgia and the related incident prevention and response mechanism, we are supporting conflict prevention in ways that not only support stability, but provide everyday benefits to the population. I've just met with Prime Minister Pashinyan just before this session, and we discussed the current situation and the challenges the country is facing. I greatly appreciate his dedication to the pursuit of lasting peace, which can be as difficult as it is a necessity. And I very much agree with him also that what he said about the state of play, but also the need for regions to be connected. And this is where connectivity plays a very important role, but connectivity cannot be at the expense of anyone. It has to be inclusive, it has to be open to all in the region, and there needs to be reciprocity. I'm aware of the difficult situation, including the humanitarian situation faced by all those who had to flee their homes nearly 2 months ago. We have been following the situation very closely, including with discussions in the PC, in the Permanent Council, with special permanent councils. I have raised the situation and the importance of respect for numerous OSCE commitments, and we stand ready to support in this regard. We are also following closely the discussions about future international engagement, and we believe that this would be very beneficial. And again, we stand ready to contribute towards this if requested and if agreed by all, based on OSCE values and based on OSCE commitments. The OSCE has a lot of specific expertise on many issues, including borders. We have years of experience when it comes to confidence building, reconciliation, and other phases of the conflict cycle. Furthermore, our institutions come immediately to mind when recalling relevant OSCE commitments and recommendations, particularly in respect also of minority accommodation. Let me stress that the goal needs to be sustainable, inclusive peace for the benefit of all the people in the region. And let me also quote the first speaker, the president of the National Assembly here, when he said that our region needs peace. It has to be a crossroads for peace. Maybe allow me just to mention some further examples where this organization is really serving the people. As the chair of this organization always underlines, it's about people. In Ukraine, we are supporting the government and society to address not only the impact of the war, but are also working to ensure continued progress in support of the country's democratic institutions. Now operating for more than 1 year, the support program for Ukraine, a wholly extra budgetary funded project, receiving funding from 30 participating states and the European Union, is supporting more than 20 projects to address issues from the impact of landmines and the environmental effects of the war to trafficking in human beings. This work is tremendously valuable, and unfortunately we still face the reality that 3 of our colleagues who had served as part of the special monitoring mission in Ukraine have been in detention in Donetsk and Luhansk for more than 600 days now. We continue to call for their immediate and their unconditional release. I remain in regular and close contact with relevant stakeholders, including other international organizations, and we continue to make every effort to advocate for and secure our colleagues' freedom. And I hope and I know that I can count on your continued support to achieve this. In Central Asia, we are strengthening trade links between countries to promote their regional integration and participation in international trade, including through support to connectivity projects, just to mention here our Green Ports project. We are working together with governments, civil society and international partners to address climate change and security challenges in high mountain areas. All of this helps to contribute to the much needed global efforts to address the impact of climate change. And we are supporting border security, including through regional cooperation, which is all the more important as the region continues to cope with the implications of the Taliban takeover in Afghanistan. And in this vein, based on a tasking from ministers in December 21, we developed a program dedicated to supporting the Central Asian participating states with these implications, including in support of women and children who have been particularly affected. In fact, we work to engage those who might be underrepresented in all our work. We work with youth. Just this week, our chair hosted a youth forum in Skopje that focused on innovation and entrepreneurship. And we work to support women, whether in the context of combating gender-based violence or in promoting women as agents for change, whether in water management or arms control. In Southeastern Europe, we continue to work to build bridges and strengthen social cohesion and integration of diverse societies, while also helping to address corruption, which is a drain on the population and an impediment to good governance. Or our work on trial monitoring, for instance, that has produced concrete findings and recommendations to help participating states in the region address systemic issues in handling serious and complex organized crime and corruption. I could go on, but I know I have to come to an end. But I just felt I wanted to give some very concrete examples of the work we do on a daily basis to serve our citizens. And I also have to mention the work we do to combat human trafficking, which is not only a human rights disaster, but it's often linked to organized crime. And here we're working with governments, parliamentarians, we're working with civil society. We have closely cooperated with the Parliamentary Assembly in the past to address the security-related challenges, but also the human rights aspects. And also to make sure, for example, that online providers that host websites that knowingly or unknowingly promote human trafficking or tackling supply chains that foster demand for traffic labor. I would underline this because this is such a serious crime and part of the very important work we do, and the OSCE has really become a leader among the international organizations in that respect. I have given you the positive side of things. To close, yes, we face challenges. The President of the Parliamentary Assembly, and I'm grateful to her support, has outlined some of them. I'm confident that we will have a good ministerial in Skopje. Just to end with a word on budget, the inflationary reality of the last 2 years and the fact that we're still operating on the budget agreed in 21 is, of course, a big challenge for all of us. And it was also budgetary constraints that kept me from joining you in Vancouver earlier this year. But we have already cut as much as we possibly could do while still meeting our mandates. And this year, and this will be my last point, in order to cover basic obligations, we had to request a transfer of cash surplus from participating states because consensus could only be reached to fund one aspect of the shortfalls related to the Hofburg costs. We have had to ask each participating state individually to supplement our core budget. And I'm very grateful to those who have supported this request. But as the Audit Committee outlined earlier this year, this is no way to run an organization. So still grateful to your support because parliamentarians play a very important role also when it comes to budgetary discussions in the respective capitals. The work of the Parliamentary Assembly is an essential element of all of our work, as I've said in the beginning, and your role as the representatives of your community and delegates represents the vital link between the OSCE and the people it serves. So I continue to count on your support, because together we can continue to ensure that the OSCE delivers in support of comprehensive and sustainable security. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Secretary General. Thank you, Helga. We really appreciate you taking the time for coming here to Yerevan to give your support. We need each other to support each other in the way. Our next speaker today is Mr. Armen Grigoryan, the Secretary of the Security Council of Armenia. I want to thank you for taking the time to meet with us today. The voice of Armenia is very important in this discussion, and it will be very interesting to hear your perspective. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, dear President of OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, dear Secretary General, dear delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor for me to participate in 21st Ottoman meeting of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe Parliamentary Assembly. I want to thank the organizers for this important initiative of holding the conference in Armenia. I also express my gratitude to the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly and to all national delegations for their efforts to protect the values the OSCE nurtures and to strengthen security and cooperation in Europe and beyond its borders. The rapidly changing nature of modern globalized world dynamically transforms regional security systems as well as political, economic, social processes within the states. This significantly increases the number of strategic challenges for national governments. Given the complexity of contemporary security issues affecting all spheres of social life, solutions require unity of efforts and participatory discussions. Thus, the regular meetings of OSCE Parliamentary Assembly play an important role in addressing global challenges and challenges the OSCE member states face today in particular. During the last few years, Armenia has passed through dramatic changes that has shaped a new vision about its role in the international arena. The democratization processes continually strengthens Armenian state institutions and make Armenian society more resilient in the face of internal and external challenges. At the same time, our young democracy has to pass the endurance test as the challenges stemming from various directions are serious and destabilizing. However, we strongly believe that the democracy will endure since the government of Armenia has a strong political will to deepen democratic governance and people of Armenia showcase strong support for democratic values. This unity of vision between the people and the government of Armenia provide conditions for democracy to succeed. In this context, international community's unwavering support to Armenia's democratization will ensure the success of Armenia's democracy. Armenia wants peace in the region, and we're firmly committed to this peace agenda and interested in the possibility of peace agreement with Azerbaijan. Unfortunately, on September 19th, Azerbaijan launched an attack on Nagorno-Karabakh, where in the presence of Russian peacekeepers, the ethnic cleansing of the indigenous Armenian population happened, and more than 100,000 Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh had to flee and come to Armenia. Notwithstanding all the difficulties we face today, Armenia stands ready to work with international partners to bring peace and prosperity to the region. In this context, the delimitation of borders between Armenia and Azerbaijan plays a significant role in creating regional stability. Armenia has publicly and transparently stated that Almaty Declaration is a fundamental document based on which Armenia and Azerbaijan must recognize each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty. In fact, on October 6 of 2022 in Prague, Prime Minister Pashinyan and President Aliyev confirmed their commitment to Almaty Declaration in a meeting facilitated by President Macron and President Michel. It's also notable that during the Brussels negotiation processes, an agreement was reached for the leaders to publicly recognize the exact size of the territory of the neighboring country to signal their commitment to the peace process. On May 14th of 2023, following the trilateral meeting in Brussels, President Michel stated that, quote, the leaders confirmed their unequivocal commitment to 1991 Almaty Declaration and the respective territorial integrity of Armenia, which is 29,800,000 square kilometer, and Azerbaijan 86,600 square kilometer. President Michel reiterated the same on July 15th. Additionally, on October 5th, 2023, quadrilateral meeting of Prime Minister Pashinyan, President Michel, President Macron, Chancellor Scholz in Granada resulted in a statement reconfirming above-mentioned position. The next important step towards the peace process is future arrangement for unblocking of the regional transportation and economic links. Armenia indeed is interested in promoting inclusive peace in the region and cross-border connectivity in South Caucasus. In achieving the objective of unblocking the communication lines, Armenia emphasizes the importance of respecting the following four principles: sovereignty, jurisdiction, reciprocity, and equality. We believe that an interconnected and economically prosperous region would be imperative for sustainable peace. It is with this understanding that Armenia has presented the Crossroad of Peace project. This initiative aims at development of communication between Armenia and the neighboring countries. Crossroads of the Peace has a great potential in efficiently linking the Gulfs, the Black Sea. I would also like to stress that a large-scale process of reforming the armed forces is underway, which includes structural and substantive changes. Again, we perceive democratization of Armenian armed forces as well as our cooperation with international partners in the security domain as a backbone of protecting Armenia's sovereignty, independence, territorial integrity, and democracy. In this context, I would like to take the opportunity and extend my appreciation to the National Platform for Democratic Oversight of the Security Sector, established with the support of OSCE under Defense and Security Committee of National Assembly of Armenia. We are looking for support from OSCE within the platform, especially in the process of developing an anti-corruption strategy for armed forces, revising the proper governance and strengthening good conduct in the defense and security sector teaching program, and the human rights in the armed forces subject taught in military training institutions. I would like to stress that the Office of the Security Council of Armenia is the part of the platform and will continue to support this important initiative. In conclusion, I would like to emphasize that the security is a multi-layered concept and it addresses political, military, economic, environmental, and human rights realms. Throughout its existence, the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly has been adamant in identifying and addressing humanitarian, human rights-related threats through its annual declarations. Armenia stands with the OSCE in its hard work that addresses issues ranging from the fight against terrorism to climate change, women empowerment, supporting programs that target the youth for a better future. We also appreciate the OSCE continued support for strengthening democratic governance in Armenia. Dear participants, thank you and let me wish you success at the 21st Ottoman meeting of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly in Yerevan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Grigorian, for your wise words on security and peace in this region. And now, dear colleagues, dear delegates, it's time for open debate. I hope to hear from many of you. This debate is an opportunity not only to reflect on what we have heard, but also to share your thoughts and ideas about the role of our organization in these very difficult times. The registration for the list of speakers is already closed. I currently have 45 speakers on my list, and I will ask you please to keep your remarks for up to 2 minutes maximum so that we can hear from everybody. And the first speaker on the list will be Mrs. Daniela de Rieder of Germany, followed by Mr. Demilly from France.
Vielen Dank, sehr geehrte Frau Präsidentin, liebe Frau Generalsekretärin Schmidt, lieber Herr Generalsekretär Montella. Seit unserer letzten Tagung in Vancouver ist die Welt leider nicht sicherer geworden oder friedvoller. Wir erleben neue Krisen. Der Exodus der armenischen Bevölkerung etwa aus der Region Bergkarabach bedeutet eine große Herausforderung für Armenien. Wir haben es gerade gehört. Und es ist gut, dass Armenien unsere diesjährige Herbsttagung ausrichtet. Ich möchte dafür stellvertretend dem armenischen Delegationsleiter Sargis Kandanyan herzlich danken. Ferner waren aber auch die Terrorattacken der islamistischen Hamas vom 7. Oktober diesen Jahres ein beispielloser Angriff, den wir auf das Schärfste verurteilen. Ich hatte vergangene Woche Gelegenheit, Familienangehörige von Entführten zu treffen. Dies war ein äußerst trauriges Ereignis. Mehr als 240 israelische Geiseln befinden sich immer noch in Gefangenschaft der Hamas-Terroristen. Was in Israel passiert, muss uns interessieren, denn Israel ist Partnerland der OSZE und hat nach der UN-Charta das Recht auf Selbstverteidigung. Dies muss nach dem humanitären Völkerrecht und der Genfer Flüchtlingskonvention aber verhältnismäßig ausgeübt werden. Militärische Angriffe gegen Krankenhäuser, Schulen und andere zivilen Einrichtungen müssen zwingend unterbleiben. Lassen Sie uns deshalb einen sofortigen humanitären Waffenstillstand in Gaza fordern, damit Lebensmittel, Trinkwasser, Medikamente, Strom und Brennstoffe geliefert werden können. Und vergessen wir über all dieses Elend nicht das Elend in der Ukraine, die gerade beim nahenden Winter auch weiterhin unsere Unterstützung und unsere Solidarität benötigen, politisch und militärisch. Liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, es kommt auf uns an, bei der Frage, ob Frieden eine Chance hat. Und lassen Sie mich damit enden, dass ich sage, all diejenigen, die glauben, Auge für Auge sei eine gute Politik, halte ich dagegen mit Mahatma Gandhi. Auge für Auge, sagt er, führt nur dazu, dass die ganze Welt erblindet. Vielen Dank.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mr. Demili from France and followed by Sargis Kandanyan from Armenia.
Merci Madame la Présidente. Mesdames, Messieurs, mes chers collègues, notre présence aujourd'hui à Erevan doit nous permettre de réaliser plusieurs missions cruciales. Tout d'abord, la mission de dénoncer une situation tragique mais prévisible, celle vécue par les Arméniens du Haut-Karabakh suite au coup de force de l'Azerbaïdjan. Ce coup militaire a provoqué l'exode de plus de 100 000 personnes, soit près de 80% de la population arménienne du Haut-Karabakh. Nous avons également la mission de soutenir les populations victimes de ce drame. Des familles entières, vous le savez, ont tout laissé derrière elles, dans l'incertitude la plus totale sur leur avenir. Enfin, nous avons la mission d'alerter. Ce qui se passe aujourd'hui est finalement un reflet du contexte géopolitique actuel. De plus en plus, la force prévaut sur le droit et les conséquences humanitaires sont à chaque fois terribles pour les populations civiles, comme en Ukraine, où 1 an et 9 mois plus tard, les bombardements russes continuent. La théorie d'une guerre éclair ayant vite été enterrée, et ce malgré des efforts de médiation. Au Proche-Orient, un autre conflit s'embrase un peu plus chaque jour, suite à l'indescriptible horreur de l'attaque terroriste du Hamas contre Israël depuis la bande de Gaza. Le bilan est estimé à 1300 morts, 3200 blessés et près de 200 otages. En réponse, Israël a légitimement lancé une opération militaire visant à détruire le Hamas, mais la population civile se trouve une nouvelle fois dans une situation de siège, ce qui déclenche une crise humanitaire sans précédent. Mes chers collègues, il est illusoire de penser que nous pourrons facilement régler ces 3 conflits, pour certains ancestraux. En revanche, nous pouvons et nous devons veiller à la sécurité des populations, à ce que l'aide humanitaire parvienne aux réfugiés, et à ce que la continuité des soins perdure. Nous avons ici un rôle actif à jouer pour rappeler que la protection des populations civiles n'est pas négociable et que le droit international humanitaire doit vraiment s'imposer à tous.
Next speaker is Sargis Kandanyan from Armenia, followed by Ms. Christina Michaud from Canada.
Madam President, dear colleagues, first let me join President of the National Assembly and the Prime Minister to welcome you all in Yerevan. It is an honor and pleasure to host the 21st autumn meeting of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly in my country. The Vancouver Declaration that we adopted a few months ago clearly identified the threats that are tackling the whole OSCE region and sent concrete signals to those who are threatening our security. However, the security of the OSCE region continued to deteriorate during the whole time. Our region is not an exception. The concerns that we were voicing and the alarms that we were ringing during these past few years have become a brutal reality. Since the establishment of this parliamentary platform, the issue of Nagorno-Karabakh has been one of the pivotal topics for the discussions. And the core of this discussion was what kind of solution of the conflict could guarantee the security and dignified life of Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh. Dear friends, there are no Armenians left in Nagorno-Karabakh because despite all these discussions and calls, Azerbaijan had always imagined one type of solution, and it has a name, ethnic cleansing, Nagorno-Karabakh without Armenians. We were all unable to prevent this. Dear colleagues, despite the wars and crises of the past, we strongly believe that our region needs real, sustainable, and lasting peace. This is not just a good wish or a dream. The peace in South Caucasus and between Armenia and Azerbaijan has a very precise formula: open borders, functional transportation and communication links, respect to each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty, inviolability of interstate borders, as well as tolerance and respect towards each other. We believe that this is the right time to give it a good chance and to bring this formula to life and to stop the sufferings of the people in this region. We are tirelessly working towards it, and we invite you all to support us on this path to make the crossroads of peace a reality. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ms. Christina Michaud from Canada, followed by Mr. Joe Wilson from the US.
Thank you, Madam President. We appreciate... Oh, pardon me, excuse me.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. En tant que parlementaire québécoise, il m'apparaît fondamental de réitérer le soutien indéfectible du Québec à l'Ukraine. Bien que d'autres conflits attirent l'attention de la communauté internationale, il ne faut pas oublier les engagements que notre Assemblée a pris depuis le début de l'agression non provoquée de la Russie en Ukraine. La déclaration de Birmingham et celle de Vancouver énoncent clairement notre engagement à veiller au maintien de notre soutien politique, financier, humanitaire et militaire apporté à l'Ukraine pour qu'elle se défende contre l'agression russe. La promesse de cet engagement doit être tenue, même si notre attention est dirigée ailleurs. L'ordre mondial est bouleversé par les différents conflits qui éclatent partout sur la planète. L'attaque du Hamas sur l'Israël et la réponse militaire de l'Israël attirent évidemment notre attention. La mort de milliers de civils, qu'ils soient israéliens ou palestiniens, doit être dénoncée et la communauté internationale doit agir pour cesser ce carnage. Alors que nous tenons cette réunion d'automne dans la magnifique ville d'Erevan, je m'en voudrais de ne pas aborder la question du conflit entre l'Arménie et l'Azerbaïdjan qui dure depuis tant d'années. Le représentant canadien aux Nations Unies a récemment qualifié la situation dans le Haut-Karabakh d'échec de la diplomatie mondiale face au nettoyage ethnique. Des mots durs qui se devaient d'être prononcés face à l'indifférence quasi généralisée de la communauté internationale. Le 19 septembre dernier, l'Azerbaïdjan a lancé une opération militaire provoquant un des plus importants mouvements de population depuis la Seconde Guerre mondiale. Le Congrès américain et le Parlement européen ont appelé à l'imposition de sanctions. Je suis d'avis que notre Assemblée devrait également se prononcer. Comme le disaient les présidents Biden et Zelensky, si la communauté internationale accepte qu'un État se comporte de la sorte, qui sera la prochaine victime? Dans le but de poser un geste clair de soutien au peuple arménien, le Canada a célébré le 25 octobre dernier l'inauguration de l'ambassade canadienne à Erevan. J'exhorte les membres de cette Assemblée à afficher clairement leur soutien à toutes les personnes touchées par les conflits qui déchirent cruellement des vies humaines. Que ce soit pour l'Ukraine, l'Arménie, Gaza ou n'importe où dans le monde, rappelons-nous que le recours à la force ne peut et ne mènera jamais à la stabilité et à une paix durable. Merci.
Our next speaker is Mr. Joe Wilson from the US, followed by Mikita Poturaev from Ukraine.
Thank you, Madam
It's unmuted.
Thank you, Madam President. We appreciate the warm Armenian hospitality of the Prime Minister, Speaker, and delegation. Sadly, on October 7th, just 6 weeks ago today, the world witnessed the worst massacre of Jewish people since the Holocaust. The murder, rape, and kidnappings unleashed that day against the peaceful Israeli citizens by the Hamas terrorists defy every standard of human conduct. Murders included 33 Americans and kidnapped including citizens of Germany, Argentina, France, America, Ukraine, Russia, and China. We mourn every single innocent life lost and pray for the well-being of the loved ones left behind. The world has been shocked by the utter depravity and barbarism of the Hamas terrorists, which are puppets of Iran, burning babies alive and parading the German-Israeli Shani Luke, beheaded in the back of a pickup truck through the streets of Gaza. The situation in Gaza serves a stark reminder of terrorist regimes posed to national security and humanity itself. We must do everything in our power to bring the hostages home and defeat Hamas. The United States has made it clear we stand unequivocally with Israel and support its right of self-defense and existence, to defer further attacks through peace through strength. Civilian casualties, we believe, are indeed human shields by the terrorists. The Mediterranean Partnership for Cooperation brings together 6 countries, and this, over the years, has been a platform to use to exchange experiences and best practices for a common interest of concern addressing the issues of terrorism. Stability is mutually beneficial for each country. And with this in mind, the world actually needs to know the bloodthirsty truth of the Hamas covenant of August 18, 1988. Quote, "The day of judgment will not come until Muslims kill Jews and kill them. Then the Jews will hide behind rocks and trees, and the rocks and trees will cry out, 'There is a Jew hiding behind me. Come and kill him.'" End of quote. With that in mind, we understand, because we hear the chants in Tehran of death to America, death to Israel, which means also death to Western civilization. I believe with dictators invading Ukraine, invading Israel, that indeed threatening Taiwan, that democracies will prevail through peace, through strength. I yield back.
Our next speaker on the list is Nikita Pohtyrayev from Ukraine, followed by Margareta Cederfelt from Sweden.
Okay. Dear colleagues, yesterday it was usual day in Ukraine. We were attacked by 38 drones, 2,000 people in Odessa region. As a result of this terroristic attack, spent all this day today without any light and electricity. Our soldiers on the front line of 1,200 kilometers killed more than 600 occupants, destroyed 7 tanks, 14 artillery systems, usual day in Ukraine. But we are here not to remind you that it is full-scale conventional war in the center of Europe. We are here to support peace in the Caucasus region. We are here to support peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan. We are here to say that peace is possible when 2 nations with old and great history respect their internationally recognized borders, their sovereignty and territorial integrity. Peace is possible when nations respect their languages, their culture, their traditions. And peace is possible when there is no destabilizing factor in the region. And we are absolutely sure that sustainable, long-lasting peace here between Armenia and Azerbaijan is possible. And it comes much quicker if there will be no destabilizing factor, so-called Russian, so-called Federation in Caucasus. And so as so-called Russian Federation has to stop its destructive activity in our organization, blocking our business. So it has to stop its destabilizing activity here in Caucasus. As soon as Russia leaves Caucasus, there will be peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan.
Our next speaker is Margareta Cederfelt from Sweden, followed by Olga Givernet from France.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, I will say a few words about one delegation who is not here. One delegation who is behind a lot of the conflicts in OSCE region. A country who is attacking Ukraine and several others. I say this because there is a huge risk that the war against Ukraine will go on for a long time. But it's not only about Ukraine, it's about our whole region. And I would like to go to another string here, and that's about what politics is about. It's about the right to speak freely. It's about the right to have a view. And there is one person I would like to mention here who criticized Russia's war in Ukraine. He did it when he was in Russia. He knew very well that there was a law, and the law does still exist, that prohibit any critical voice against Russia's war on Ukraine. Vladimir Kara-Murza. He is today in jail. He has been sentenced to 15 years in jail. He is in Siberia. He has no right to medical care. His health is in trouble. And I think it's our duty to support those people who dare to speak out, who do it in the name of democracy. And we have to act for release of Vladimir Kara-Murza. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Our next speaker will be Olga Givernet from France, followed by Mr. Giedrius Surplus from Lithuania.
Madame la Présidente, chers collègues, la paix et la sécurité ne règnent plus sur le continent européen ni à ses portes. L'Ukraine, le Caucase et plus récemment le Moyen-Orient en sont les tristes exemples. On assiste à nouveau avec effroi au terrorisme pseudo-religieux, à la barbarie, aux crimes de guerre, voire aux crimes contre l'humanité. Les victimes ne sont pas que des soldats. Les civils sont pris pour des cibles et détenus, torturés ou assassinés. Fin septembre, l'UNHCR annonçait plus de 114 millions de personnes déplacées de force depuis le début de l'année. L'OSCE a pour mandat d'alerter les précoces, la prévention des conflits, la contribution à leur règlement et la gestion des situations post-conflit. Elle s'efforce de promouvoir la coopération, la sécurité et l'ancrage de la démocratie. Au regard de la situation actuelle, on ne peut que s'interroger sur son échec ou son utilité. D'ailleurs, je regrette une fois encore l'absence de la présidence en exercice à notre réunion aujourd'hui. L'OSCE aurait-elle pu empêcher ces conflits? Elle l'a tenté, notamment grâce à la mission spéciale d'observation, au programme de soutien à l'Ukraine, au groupe de Minsk, au groupe de travail chargé de rapprocher les parties. Visiblement, ce n'a pas été suffisant si l'on se réfère à la violation manifeste des principes, notamment de la Charte de Paris et de l'acte final d'Helsinki. Qu'est-ce qui empêche la réalisation d'une véritable paix et sécurité en Europe? Les raisons sont nombreuses. L'absence de véritables mécanismes de sanctions, de conséquences politiques voire juridiques, la règle du consensus ainsi que les intérêts personnels et la mauvaise foi de certains États. Les dispositifs n'ont pas permis d'éviter ces conflits ou de les résoudre durablement et pacifiquement. Aussi, il me paraît urgent de renforcer l'OSCE afin de lui redonner crédibilité et utilité. Je souhaite ainsi qu'au cours du Forum méditerranéen de lundi matin, la coopération de l'OSCE avec nos partenaires permette d'éviter une escalade du conflit au Proche-Orient. Enfin, je souhaite rappeler à nos collègues arméniens qui nous reçoivent aujourd'hui et que je remercie l'engagement de la France aux côtés de l'Arménie. Je veux réaffirmer le soutien de la France à sa souveraineté et à son intégrité territoriale. Je vous remercie.
Our next speaker will be Giedrius Surplus from Lithuania, followed by Mr. Dan Barna from Romania.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, I would like to first use this opportunity and congratulate our neighboring country, Latvia, for her Day of Independence today. And I'm just calculating that we have close to 20 countries in this room that are celebrating their independence from Russia. And some of them, they do it 2 times per year because they have 2 liberations. So 2008, Russia occupied part of Georgia. 2014, it started the aggression against Ukraine, which continues up until this day. In 2020, we saw people being beaten, raped, and put to jail in Belarus, and it still goes on now. We recently saw the conflict over Nagorno-Karabakh. We have the Hamas terrorist attack against Israel. We have a range of conflicts in Africa. And in this burning world order, we do need efficient and effective OSCE. But dear ladies and gentlemen, sadly, Russia effectively turned the strength of this organization, its consensus rule, against it. Russia's exploitation of consensus goes beyond blocking unfavorable decisions. It is obvious that Russia wants to destroy the organization, since due to Russia's abuse of consensus rule, the OSCE cannot approve its budget, we are hearing about it today, extend leadership mandates, or even agree on next year's chairmanship. The only way for the OSCE to move forward is to isolate the aggressor from the organization, or at least any decision-making processes. The delegation of Lithuania, therefore, calls on the OSCE chairman in office not to allow the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia to take part at the OSCE Ministerial Council that's due this month in Skopje, just as this was prevented last year in Luj. Finally, I would like to express Lithuania's full support for Armenia in comforting and accepting the war refugees, and I wish to reiterate Lithuania's strong and unwavering support to Ukraine's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders, and our solidarity with the courageous people of Ukraine. We are and we will keep standing with you until your victory. Slava Ukraini!
Our next speaker is Dan Barna from Romania, followed by Irene Sharalambides from Cyprus.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, in the past 2 years, the world as we used to know it changed significantly. OSCE needs to adopt it, and so his member countries. Even since the start of Russia's illegal, unjustified, and unprovoked war of aggressions against Ukraine, the international community has invested significantly in the means provided by the international law. Romania firmly supported the efforts aimed at de-escalating the situations in Ukraine, including by boosting OSCE's action in being part in resolving the conflict in Ukraine. Romania's support for Ukraine is consistent and multidimensional, with a specific emphasis on the support for Ukrainian refugees and the facilitations of Ukrainian grain exports. We have provided assistance for more than 5 million of refugees who passed through our country, and we provided also shelter and conditions for a decent and functional life for approximately 85,000 people who have remained in the present in Romania. The Ukrainian peace formula is the best proposal for a just and lasting peace in Ukraine, as it is directly grounded on the United Nations Charter and fundamental values of international law. There could be no long-lasting peace in Ukraine without the full restoration of Ukrainians' independence, sovereignty, and full territorial integrity in respect of the international law. Ukraine is not fighting only for its territorial integrity or independence. It is defending the values and principles that represent the cornerstone of this order: democracy, respect of human and dignity and liberty. As the Russian Federation continues its war of aggression against Ukraine and its destabilizing actions, I would like also to address Ukrainians' most affected neighbor by Russia's conduct, the Republic of Moldova. In the light of Russia's interference in the international affairs of the Republic of Moldova, as seen during the local elections earlier this month, imagine, because I was there, imagine 15 new clone parties involved in elections. For all of the parties you can dream, the Russians created a clone there in Moldova. We need to support Chisinau in strengthening core institutions and building resilience. With the help of their international partners and by fulfilling the European conditions for a sustainable and irreversible European path, these objectives can be achieved by Moldova, by Ukraine, by this region, by this conflict, by the whole region. Thank you very much.
Next speaker, Irene Charalambides from Cyprus, followed by Robin Wagener from Germany.
Thank you, Madam President. We are dealing with an extremely concerning situation in the OSCE area. The war in Ukraine after Russia's illegal invasion continues with no end in sight. Just over a month ago, more than 100,000 Armenians were forced to flee from Nagorno-Karabakh. Tensions threaten the Western Balkans, not to mention the situation in the Middle East. The October 7th massacre perpetrated by Hamas. Hamas slaughtered infants, children, elderly people, young people, an attack against Israeli civilians, an attack against Israel has poured fuel onto a fire in the Middle East. At the moment, a number of countries have sent military personnel to the region. Some are based in Cyprus. USA, Canada, France, Germany, Netherlands, and other countries have requested to use facilities in Cyprus so that they can evacuate their citizens living in the region if needed, especially in the event that this crisis becomes more generalized. Cyprus, for its part, has proposed the creation of a sea corridor to provide international humanitarian aid to Gaza. This proposal has been endorsed by the United Nations, the EU institutions, and various individuals leaders of countries that play a role in the region. It is also accepted by Israel and by the Arab countries and shows how Cyprus can be part of efforts to enhance stability in a highly unstable region. We have not discussed, dear colleagues, yet about migration. We are witnessing weaponization of migration, especially by Turkey. So, in conclude, OSCE must step up its mediation role. If individual countries can play the role of the mediator, then so much more should be the OSCE be able to do that. Thank you.
Next speaker, Robin Wagener from Germany, followed by Richard Kols from Latvia.
Vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen. Ganz herzlichen Dank erstmal an die Kolleginnen und Kollegen aus Armenien, die uns so gute Gastfreundschaft hier in ihrem Land für die Parlamentarische Versammlung leisten. Und diese Gastfreundschaft ist ein wichtiges Zeichen, und dass wir es hier stattfinden lassen können, ein wichtiges Zeichen internationaler Aufmerksamkeit und Solidarität mit der Region. Und das in einer Zeit, in der viele Regionen für viele Konflikte unsere Aufmerksamkeit brauchen. Ich finde es wichtig, dass wir für die friedliche Lösung zwischen Armenien und Aserbaidschan eintreten und alles dafür tun, dass es keine weitere Eskalation gibt. Und ich freue mich umso mehr für die Einladung, weil sie nicht nur uns die Gelegenheit gibt, hier für den Frieden einzutreten, sondern gleichzeitig auch die Wertschätzung der Gastgeber für internationale Formate zur Konfliktlösung und Konfliktbearbeitung verdeutlicht. Und dieses Bekenntnis zum Friedensprozess haben wir eben ja auch sehr deutlich vom Premierminister gehört. Vielen Dank dafür. Wir leben in einer Zeit, in der nicht nur viele Krisen unsere Aufmerksamkeit jetzt auf uns ziehen und, um mal Krisen weniger abstrakt zu formulieren, in der unzählige Menschen Opfer von brutaler Gewalt werden, von Krieg und von Verbrechen, in der Männer, Frauen und Kinder getötet, verschleppt, gefoltert und vertrieben werden. Ich denke dabei an die Opfer des russischen völkerrechtswidrigen Angriffskriegs gegen die Ukraine, an die Opfer des menschenverachtenden Terrors der Hamas und auch an die Zivilistinnen, die in Gaza Opfer des von der Hamas skrupellos verschuldeten Krieges werden. Und wir leben in einer Zeit, in der wir uns leider darauf einstellen müssen, noch länger und noch mehr Konflikte zu haben. Denn die globalen Konflikte nehmen zu und ich fürchte, sie werden es weiter tun. Die Klimakrise verursacht zunehmende Ressourcenkonflikte und in all den Veränderungen unserer Welt sehen wir einen zunehmenden Systemkonflikt zwischen autoritären Diktaturen, die mit Gewalt und rücksichtslos ihre Interessen durchsetzen, und den Demokratien gemeinsam mit allen, die an der Seite einer regelbasierten Völkerrechtsordnung stehen. Als hybriden Konflikt mit hartem Krieg, aber auch mit Destabilisierung, Fake News und anderem Wir haben das in Birmingham sehr eindeutig ausgetauscht, wie wir alle von betroffen sind. Und in dieser Zeit ist es wichtig, dass wir als Parlamentarier zusammenkommen für Menschenrechte und Demokratie, aber auch insbesondere für den Frieden in Europa und Zentralasien. Darum braucht es starke globale und regionale Zusammenschlüsse. Darum sollten wir hier den Dialog führen und auch über Trends hinweg. Und darum sollten wir uns alle zu Hause an unsere Regierungen wenden und daran appellieren, die von Russland aktiv ausgenutzten und verursachten institutionellen Probleme der OSZE zu lösen und die Ämter zu verlängern, um diese im letzten Kalten Krieg geschaffene wichtige Plattform für den Frieden zu erhalten, denn wir brauchen sie.
Our next speaker is Richard Kols from Latvia, followed by Mr. Bocorisvili from Georgia.
Thank you, Madam President and Madam Secretary General. Thank you very much for being with us here today. First of all, I wanted to thank Armenian delegation for hosting us here. And, well, discussing the topics of, actually, I would narrow it down, is the existential question of the existence of the OSCE as such. And Madam Secretary General, I would love to hear your elaboration when you said that you're confident about the success of upcoming meeting in Skopje. I don't share that optimism, unfortunately. I do not, because there's too much at stake, the whole existence of the OSCE. If that is a failure and we do not live up to the principles and we are making concessions, not only your job is endangered, but it seems the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly will be the last institution still alive trying to uphold this organization's principles. So in this regard, it's really a dire situation that the OSCE is in. On top of that, what we have seen actually for the past year or so, the aggressor is scaling up its aggression. The Middle East, I would draw the similarities somewhat of diverting the attention from the Ukraine, from eastern Ukraine. And what we see right now, we see just recently in Moldova, 60 million is being funded to affect the elections, municipal elections, by Russian Federation. That's the Moldova's intelligence office estimates, 60 million. Then we see Finland right now is involved in migrant instrumentalization. This is something where Latvia, this year alone, 12,000 migrants will try to be pushed over the border from the member state of the OSCE that are again present in this room. And imagine today in standing committee, this member state delegation is teaching us what is democracy. A country where is a legitimate president, where our 2,000 political prisoners are here teaching us what is democracy. So this is something where we need to step up, and unfortunately today at standing committee, we somewhat failed, but I hope we will deliver in Vienna. But I would love to hear your assessment on really what gives you that optimism of upcoming meeting in Skopje. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mr. Potochvili from Georgia, followed by Ville Kaunisto from Finland.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, we are gathered here in Yerevan, members of the Parliamentary Assembly of the organization, which was created to ensure peace and security in Europe. Peace and security has very special meaning and importance for our region. Being in Yerevan, I would like to express my hope that Armenia and Azerbaijan will find a way to ensure lasting peace in our region. Dear colleagues, 2 weeks ago, a Georgian citizen was shot dead by Russian occupation forces in Tkhinvali region. This is another reminder of what the occupation is. Georgia has repeatedly experienced Russian aggression and continues to face Russian occupation and painful consequences of the war. We still have Russian military presence in Georgian regions, Abkhazia and Tkhinvali. That is neither legal nor justified. We have hundreds of thousands of people who are forcibly displaced from their homes and whose rights are violated, and people who are arrested, kidnapped or killed by occupation forces. It's also important to keep in mind that what we see in Ukraine is a continuation of the actions that Russia has been using in Georgia for more than 30 years. And it is Russian ambitions that are the threat of our common security on this continent. That's why we must clearly say no to violations of the international law, and we have to do everything possible to bring countries back to the rules-based order and stick to the agreed rules. Here I would also mention that beside the security threats that Georgia faces for decades, we managed to do our best and transform our country, implement successful reforms, and to make it a valuable part of the democratic world. Georgia, together with Ukraine and Moldova, applied for EU membership last year. We express our appreciation for granting European perspective to Georgia and don't hide our disappointment for the unnecessary differentiation between Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia at this very critical moment of European history. I hope that the European Council in December will take into account reports and recommendations from the European Commission to grant candidate status to Georgia, and we will be able to embark the process of EU membership together with other candidate countries as soon as possible, as it is vital for a better future of Europe. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Mr. Ville Kaunisto from Finland, followed by Mr. Per Joan Pons from Spain.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, this is my first PA meeting as the head of our delegation, and it is a great honor to follow the footsteps of legendary Ilkka Kanerva and to have my dear colleague Pia Kauma as a president of OSCE PA. Finland strongly condemns Russia's ongoing brutal war in Ukraine, and we will stand with Ukraine as long as needed. We also want to strongly condemn Hamas's attack in Israel. These terrible examples are part of untroubling times in the world. This we know well, being here in Armenia. Thank you, Armenia, for having us. Madam Chair, condemning is not enough. We must build lasting peace. I want to emphasize our strong history in building peace around the world and remind us all that Finland and the world lost a huge person and great example of peace building as Nobel Peace Prize winner President Martti Ahtisaari passed away recently. May he rest in peace, he certainly deserves it. These are the grand steps that our delegation will follow in building peace and at the same time strengthening OSCE and reminding about the key focus points of OSCE towards our upcoming chair 2025. Let us keep in mind, if there was no OSCE, we would have to build it today. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Per Joan Pons from Spain, followed by Reinhold Lopatka from Austria.
Muchísimas gracias, Presidenta, en primer lugar. Y, en segundo lugar, en nombre de la delegación española, darle las gracias a la delegación armenia por la invitación y por centrar el conflicto precisamente ahora en el terreno, ¿no? Aquí precisamente en su país. Y, por lo tanto, es una oportunidad para ellos y para todos para poner en evidencia la situación en la que estamos. Solamente unos apuntes. Yo soy optimista. Yo creo que si te dedicas a la política, te dedicas a cambiar la vida de la gente y, por tanto, tienes que ser optimista. Y la política sirve para eso. Si no, desde un enfoque pesimista, creo que no llegaríamos a solucionar la vida de la gente. Y ligarlo con tres cosas que ha dicho la secretaria general Hilma Smith. La primera es que la primera crisis que tenemos que resolver es la crisis climática, la transición climática, pero también que nadie se quede atrás. Para mí eso es fundamental y ese es uno de los roles de la Asamblea Parlamentaria y también de la OSCE. La segunda, que es lo que está circulando también, es que los ciudadanos no se sientan lejos de las instituciones y no sientan que la democracia no les sirve para nada. Por tanto, necesitamos potenciar todas las organizaciones multilaterales y potenciar, por supuesto, esa relación de delivery de resultados que la secretaria general Schmidt ha dicho. Y querría terminar con una tercera idea, y usted ha hablado de todos los cambios geopolíticos, de la mutación geopolítica, y creo que es realmente lo importante, porque estamos viendo qué respuesta damos, ¿no? Y voy a citar a un político conservador, a Dominique de Villepin, que en relación a la crisis de Israel en Gaza ha dicho que lo que va a resolver esta crisis no es la fuerza, es la justicia. Y, por cierto, deber de solidaridad y deber de humanidad con el pueblo de Israel. Pero no hay que olvidar que el pueblo de Gaza está secuestrado 2 veces, por Netanyahu y por Hamas. Muchas gracias.
Our next speaker is Reinhold Lopatka from Austria, followed by Dimitrios Markopoulos from Greece.
Dear President, dear colleagues, first of all, I want to thank Secretary General Schmidt for her work and for her participation. Yes, we see a lot of obstacles for your work, but the most important thing is that we show that OSCE, BA, and OSCE are still functioning. You mentioned it in your speech, and we tried to do it last time in Poland when we observed the elections, next time when we go to Serbia. And this is important in times where from meeting to meeting we are facing more and more conflicts. It's a ring of conflicts around the European Union and also a ring around the member states of OSCE. I want to be focused in this short time on Nagorno-Karabakh. After the massive exodus of the Armenian people, which is a tragedy. And it's a tragedy that we could not avoid it. But now we have to do everything, and I have here big concerns for the preservation of cultural, religious, and historical heritage in the region. And we have to urge our Azerbaijani friends to refrain from further destroying and neglecting or altering the origins of cultural, religious, and historical heritage. And here, I hope we can reach it, that it is possible to preserve and protect and promote this still existing rich diversity. The protection of the Armenian cultural, historical, and religious heritage in Nagorno-Karabakh in line with UNESCO standards and the Azerbaijani's international commitments has to be on the agenda also of OSCE. What we need, of course, is a comprehensive peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan, but it has to include the protection of this Armenian heritage and also the protection of the property of the people who were forced to leave their homes. Here, it is a very, very strong task also for OSCE to reach these results. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Dimitrios Markopoulos from Greece, followed by Leo Hosakos from Canada.
Thank you, Madam President. Our main concern must be the greater functionality of our institution. We achieved this on migration. A big number of OSCE's mission implemented in many countries. Unfortunately, we have not succeeded the same with regional wars and conflicts. We were ineffective with Armenia and Azerbaijan, with Russia and Ukraine, even with the terrorist crime against Israeli citizens from Hamas. We were and we are very slow. Do not forget, our main goal is to prevent conflicts and to prepare the ground for peace. As an organization, we need a new compass, a new approach, a new vision and orientation. We must be more proactive and more political and diplomatic energetic. Effectiveness is the word we need. We are not so effective. We have to see the truth. It is clear that OSCE's obligation is to force on the negotiating table Russia and Ukraine. Armenia and Azerbaijan. Greece, my country, already made it with Turkey. Aggression is not the proper way. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker will be Leo Housakos from Canada, followed by Dagbjörg Hagunardottir from Iceland.
Thank you. Dear friends, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law is under attack and has never been under a more precarious situation in my lifetime. We have seen over the last few years, particularly what has happened in Ukraine, what's happened in Artsakh, some of you call it as Nagorno-Karabakh. Democracies we always run when it's a little bit too late, after the egregious behavior takes place, after we see these nations contravening the rule of law, after we see illegal and inappropriate military action, and we run at a consequence that costs democracies and states like ours a huge amount. Not just the human crisis, but the actual economic crisis as well, which happens to these particular regions and spreads out. We need to take concrete action. When you have 120,000 people in Artsakh, Armenians being displaced, and absolutely the world has forgotten about it. There should be no double standards. Just because the people of Armenia, the people of Artsakh don't have oil and gas, their lives, their democracy, their human rights are not any less important than a nation like Azerbaijan. And just because our governments and our parliaments and some around the world have not taken steps to secure their energy needs, we shouldn't allow these type of consequences also have impact on other lives. We need to take concrete steps. And even though I believe in diplomacy and dialogue, at the end of the day, it needs to be followed with concrete action. I agree with what the European Parliament did on October the 5th, calling upon all EU organizations to continue to carry a dialogue to achieve peace. But at the end of the day, we all know that bullies and states that act in the fashion that some act need to be held to account. When those bullies don't come to these particular forums, and it's because they're sending us a message that talk and is not enough, it needs to be followed by action. When bullies do come here and they disrupt these organizations, it needs to be followed with consequences. So for this organization, NATO, the UN, and all other international forums, it's not enough to make declarations. We need to follow it up with concrete consequences so the bullies know that their egregious behavior will have a price to be paid. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Dagbjörg Hagunardottir from Iceland, followed by Valérie Boyer from France.
Madam President, dear colleagues, on the 24th of last October, all women in Iceland, including immigrant women, were encouraged to go on strike, to stop working, both paid and unpaid labor. In a powerful display of solidarity, over 100,000 women of our nation, which consists only of 370,000 inhabitants, joined their forces. The strike brought attention to persisting gender disparities in Iceland and the urgent need for action. The strike also highlighted the pressing issue of gender-based and sexual violence. Shockingly, over 40% of women say they have experienced such violence in their lifetimes, with transgender individuals, women with disabilities, and women of color experiencing even higher rates of violence. For 14 years in a row, Iceland has been ranked the best country in the world for gender equality by the World Economic Forum. But we are still significantly far from completely equal, with the Forum assigning us an overall score of 91.2%. The facts are staggering. The Forum has also found that at the current rate of progress worldwide, it will take 131 years for the world to close the gender pay gap. The OSSE has recognized the gender equality as an urgent security issue and must continue to do so. It connects all dimensions of human security, stability, and peace. Societies which benefit from greater gender equality generally enjoy a more stable political environment, which are less prone to violence and conflict. The empowering of women and addressing of gender-based discrimination contributes to social cohesion and reduces the risk of violence and conflict. Promoting gender equality is also essential in the realm of global governance and diplomacy. Ensuring equal representation and participation of women in decision-making processes at national and international levels contributes to more effective and inclusive governance. I encourage OSCE member states in acknowledging demands of immediate action against gender-based violence, the undervaluation of women's work, and the pursuit of true equality. The women's strike signifies that Iceland's reputation as a leader in gender equality is no longer an excuse for inaction.
Thank you. And next speaker will be Valérie Boyer from France, followed by Victoria Spartz from the US.
Est en Europe. Alors que nos yeux sont tournés vers Israël qui a subi une attaque atroce du terrorisme islamique du Hamas le 7 octobre, le pire massacre de juifs depuis la Shoah, nous, Français, nous pleurons nos 40 victimes françaises et attendons des nouvelles des otages français encore retenus par le Hamas. Israël a le droit de se défendre, cela a été dit, je le redis. Mais nous n'oublions pas l'Arménie, nous n'oublions pas les Arméniens. Après Vancouver, où nous avions alerté des risques de nettoyage ethnique, l'Artsakh n'existe plus, puisque 120 000 Arméniens ont été déplacés après avoir subi d'horribles souffrances par l'Azerbaïdjan. Aujourd'hui, ça a été rappelé également, il est nécessaire de protéger ce patrimoine après le nettoyage ethnique, de protéger le patrimoine religieux, de protéger le patrimoine historique de l'Artsakh. J'espère que notre Assemblée pourra s'y consacrer. Mes chers collègues, je voudrais aussi insister, puisque l'Assemblée parlementaire de l'OSCE doit parler d'une seule voix, d'une voix forte, qui ne tremble pas pour dénoncer et protéger, dénoncer les agissements qui sont indignes d'un pays de notre Assemblée. Protéger une population arménienne déjà trop éprouvée. Quant à l'Arménie qui nous accueille pour notre session d'automne, la voilà avec la lourde tâche d'accueillir, de soigner, de rassurer 100 000 personnes ayant quitté leur pays, leur terre, leur foyer. Vous le savez sans doute, mais 57 prisonniers de guerre sont toujours retenus par l'Azerbaïdjan. Et je voudrais en citer quelques-uns. Araïk Aratounian, David Babayan, Ruben Vardanian, Levon Marsekian, David Manoukian et les autres. Ces personnes, vous les avez peut-être rencontrées pour ceux qui sont allés en Artsakh. Aujourd'hui, elles croupissent dans les geôles de Bakou. Leur crime, être arménien et avoir aimé la démocratie. Et je voudrais qu'on pense à eux aujourd'hui, qu'on cite leurs noms et qu'on s'occupe de les ramener dans leur pays. Mes chers amis arméniens, vous avez un grand rôle, une grande responsabilité. Elle pèse sur vous parce que dans cette crise humanitaire, vous devez consoler vos compatriotes et je souhaite ardemment que la paix OSCE, par nos voix unies, se positionne fortement auprès de vous. Chers collègues, vous le savez, de l'OSCE, chers collègues de l'OSCE, vous le savez, il n'y a plus d'Artsakh. Aujourd'hui, faisons en sorte que l'intégrité territoriale de l'Arménie, qui est menacée, ne soit pas encore une fois mise à mal. Tout à l'heure, le Premier ministre Pachinian nous a présenté un plan de paix. J'espère que notre présence ici contribuera à faire en sorte que l'Arménie ne souffre pas encore trop. Elle a déjà trop souffert. Il est de notre responsabilité collective d'être aux côtés des victimes, faisant honneur à notre mission en soutenant les Arméniens.
Merci. And the next speaker is Victoria Spartz from the US, followed by Mr. Mark Demesmaker from Belgium.
Okay, can you hear me? Sorry. Thank you. As the new member to this institution, I wanted just to share a few observations, but not new to politics in general. I think the organization needs to look at its strengths and weaknesses and see, when you have limited resources, you need to see how you can be the most effective. And I think the discussions and functions that, OSCE is trying to do are too broad and redundant in a lot of ways. It needs to become, it's not like UN, it can do more than resolutions, and the resolutions are worthless. It needs to have more on the ground actionable projects, whether it's monitoring, whether it's, sharing best practices, doing some observation, but they need to have with some consequences. Either that's a sanctions enforcement, monitoring, other ones that actually have some teeth.
It also can deal with political prisoners and other issues, but it needs to be something that is meaningful. And I think it has a unique structure where we're dealing with people that decision makers in their parliaments, we're dealing with people that actually have a political power back home, and I think that strengths need to be utilized more effectively. It's not just appointees of some organization that they just go there and all they do is just talk to each other. So I think we cannot be just talking to each other. There are too many crises and issues that are very serious, have to be dealt more effectively, but I think it's important to look at the internal processes and see how they can be reformed to become more effective, and have also communication plan that if you have offenders and you find some violations of what it agreed as violation as an organization, that needs to be more visibility to put pressure on some of these governments. So I think processes and looking at them more narrowing the scope and also have a better communication will help a lot for the organization to be more meaningful. Otherwise, it will become a waste of time. And I think it's unfortunately that crises have to be dealt much more, and we're not doing it as a good job.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Mark Demesmaker from Belgium, followed by Ms. Yevhenia Kravchuk from Ukraine.
Thank you. And colleagues, never before the principles of the Helsinki Final Act have been violated in such a blatant way by OSCE member states. The siege, the starvation, the ethnic cleansing and the military aggression against the people of Artsakh by Azerbaijan, the Russian aggression against the democratic and sovereign Ukraine. It's always important to identify aggressors and victims, to blame aggressors and to stand with the victims. We support Armenia on its way to lasting peace and independence, and we stand with Ukraine. This is day 632 of the Russian aggression, and when meeting young Russian political activists in exile in Brussels earlier this week, I asked them, listen, maybe in Yerevan there will be a Russian delegation, maybe not, and they will follow remotely, but what would, assuming that they are still interested in the OSCE and in some sort of dialogue, how would you try to get through to them? And their answer was a desperate one. It's impossible at this stage. But repeat and tell them that you will continue to support Ukraine, whatever it takes, because they will be interested in hearing that. So that's what I do. And I say, we stand with Ukraine. We stand with our values. We have and we will. And you can put a lot of efforts in bullshitting people around the world with your lies, with your propaganda, with your disinformation, in trying to convince people that authoritarianism is better than democracy, that aggression is better than partnership, that your Ruski Mir is superior and has to be imposed to others. Well, I have to disappoint you. When I was in liberated Kherson 3 weeks ago, I saw nobody who wants to return to your glorious Ruski Mir. Madam President, the biggest enemy of imperial Russia or other imperial states is the unity of the civilized world. That is our role, to continue to show this unity.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Yevhenia Kravchuk from Ukraine, followed by Emanuele Loperfido from Italy.
Dear colleagues, just because my colleague Mikita Puturayo said that 38 Shaheeds flying to Ukraine, over 2,000 of people because of that lost the electricity is normal, it doesn't mean that you have to forget about it. And we have to remember that Ukraine is fighting for you as well. You mentioned about democracy, about the values that we share. Well, we fight for these values. And Russia would like you to be distracted from the war in Ukraine. They would like and will do and will put on fire different corners of the world to be distracted, to wait until you all get tired and sort of, then forget about the whole thing. Ukraine cannot forget, because if we stop, there will be no Ukraine. There will be no delegation coming to OSCE saying about what's going on in our part of the world. And today in the morning, I've heard some regrets that Russians are not on board, we cannot have dialogues. Well, I'm totally sure that Russia wants this board to think, to drown. And what happens, what crew does if someone wants to damage the board? They throw them overboard. That's what we need to do. We have to isolate the aggressor and not give them opportunity to block the whole thing. And the last thing, I would like to express my gratitude and express my appreciation to a small country, Estonia, that presidency is being blocked by Russia in 2024. Just imagine, a tyrant is blocking a democratic country, and we cannot say that it is normal. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Emanuele Loperfido from Italy, followed by Farah Karimi from the Netherlands.
Gentile Presidente, gentili colleghi, la sessione odierna avviene in un contesto di tensioni internazionali crescenti, un ciclo ormai iniziato da 2 anni che non sembra essersi esaurito. Ciò comporta per l'OSCE una doppia sfida. Da un lato occorre rafforzare la dimensione costitutiva dell'OSCE parlamentare, essere un forum di dialogo, sancita dall'atto finale di Helsinki, una dimensione che è stata duramente colpita dall'aggressione russa, ma che ha resistito. Dall'altro occorre fronteggiare la crescente interconnessione tra le 2 grandi crisi, quella innescata dalla guerra di aggressione della Russia e quella apertasi con l'aggressione di Hamas contro Israele. Entrambe hanno a che fare con scenari geopolitici più ampi, che potrebbero produrre conseguenze di medio periodo anche in aree come il Mediterraneo orientale e l'Asia centrale. L'OSCE è la più grande organizzazione intergovernativa di sicurezza regionale e ha da tempo allargato i suoi ambiti di azione sia da un punto di vista geografico che dal punto di vista degli ambiti di azione. Particolarmente promettente, ad esempio, l'azione del Comitato ad hoc contro il terrorismo, che riveste un ruolo sempre più strategico in una fase in cui alla guerra diretta si affiancano sempre più forme di guerra ibrida. Le azioni di destabilizzazione e disinformazione, talora di vero e proprio terrorismo, costituiscono sfide drammatiche ai valori di stabilità, pace, democrazia e rispetto dei diritti umani tramite il dialogo che l'OSCE persegue. Coerentemente con la politica che il governo italiano persegue è necessario rafforzare l'azione svolta nell'Europa dell'Est, nei Balcani, prestando una specifica attenzione per il Mediterraneo. Del resto già l'atto finale di Helsinki riconosceva che la relazione che esiste nel più ampio contesto della sicurezza mondiale, fra la sicurezza in Europa e la sicurezza nell'area del Mediterraneo, e da qui i partenariati con Algeria, Egitto, Israele, Giordania, Marocco e Tunisia, ai quali altri ne dovrebbero aggiungersi. È importante che su questo ci sia una visione comune, che non si guardi cioè alla sicurezza mediterranea come un elemento di distrazione rispetto al focus sulla situazione in Ucraina e sul consolidato focus euroasiatico. Sarebbe un errore molto grave perché si perderebbe di vista quella connessione che hanno invece ben presenti gli attori ostili, come la Russia, che in questi anni hanno operato non solo con la guerra aperta, ma anche con pervasive politiche di destabilizzazione. Posso assicurare che su questi temi l'impegno della delegazione italiana sarà sicuramente costante, anche ricercando a livello nazionale tutti gli appoggi necessari per svolgere un lavoro realmente efficace.
Grazie. The next speaker will be Farah Karimi from the Netherlands, followed by Mekmurad Muhamedov from Turkmenistan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sincere thanks to our Armenian colleagues for their hospitality. I would like to express my gratitude to Prime Minister Pashinyan for his constructive and peace-seeking address this afternoon. Also congratulate Armenia on becoming the 124th member state of the International Criminal Court. This milestone is a clear indication of Armenia's strong commitment to justice and human rights at an international level. As highlighted earlier, the post-World War II, Second World War world order is facing a collapse. This period is marked by conflicts and crises ranging from the aggressive war of Russia against Ukraine to ongoing internal war in Sudan and other African countries, the conflicts in South Caucasus, where we are now, and the ongoing war in Gaza. I want to highlight 3 points. First, global peace and security at risk. The world is witnessing an alarming frequency of conflicts, threatening international peace and security. There are not just geopolitical disputes, but crises impacting millions globally. Secondly, breakdown of multilateralism. The weakening state of multilateral institutions from the UN Security Council to the OSCE and the disregard for organizations like the ICRC, guardians of international humanitarian law, is a severe concern. This erosion hampers our collective ability to uphold global order and tackle conflicts. And finally, erosion of the rule of law. The increasing incidence of war crimes and crimes against humanity and the double standards in addressing these violations pose serious questions about our dedication to the rule of law and justice. We strongly condemn Russia's aggression against Ukraine and support the Ukrainian resistance against the aggressor, not only with words but with concrete actions. We also condemn all forms of terrorism, including attacks on innocent civilians. There can be no justification for acts of terror such as those by Hamas against Israeli civilians. According to the UN Human Rights Office, collective punishment, the use of starvation and dehydration as war tactics, indiscriminate bombings and attacks on hospitals, schools, aid workers and journalists, as it is happening now against people of Gaza, are considered as war crimes. Even in times of war, there are rules to be followed. Double standards in this regard only serve to weaken our collective efforts towards achieving global peace and security. Furthermore, it is a matter of profound concern and indeed a disgrace for the international community that we have failed to effectively require a ceasefire and address the dire humanitarian disaster in Gaza. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the next speaker will be Mekmurad Muhamedov from Turkmenistan, followed by Gisèle Jourda from France.
Thank you, Madam President. I have the honor to speak on behalf of Turkmenistan delegation. Turkmenistan as a neutral state follows a policy of friendship and trust aimed at ensuring peace and security. My country firmly believes in the principles of the OSCE, which support security, stability, and cooperation among nations. Nowadays, it is essential for all OSCE PA member states to act with a high sense of responsibility in resolving the current situations through diplomacy and dialogue. On this subject, Turkmenistan supports efforts at the parliamentary level to conduct negotiations through mechanisms consistent with the UN Charter. Dear colleagues, I would like to mention 2 initiatives put forward by the President of Turkmenistan, Serdar Berdimuhamedov, at the 78th session of the UN General Assembly related to peace and security. The first initiative is related to begin discussing the possibilities of developing a global security strategy based on the principles of the UN Charter and international law, taking into account current realities. Such strategy should include preventive diplomacy and using the potential of neutrality for the peaceful settlement of disputes. The second initiative is related to create, under the auspices of the UN, the format of the Conference on Security in Central Asia and adjacent zones, the purpose of which is to develop approaches and solutions aimed at bringing closer efforts of the Central Asian countries and world community in the ensuring sustainable conflict-free development of the region. We believe that these proposals will be supported by the OSCE member states. In conclusion, I would like to emphasize that Turkmenistan is ready to further develop our parliamentary cooperation in the basis of the neutrality and peace-loving policy. I sincerely thank the Armenian Parliament for their hospitality. I wish you all sound health and success. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Gisele Jourda from France, followed by Ville Skinnari from Finland.
Merci Madame la Présidente. En tant que membre nouvellement nommé de cette Assemblée, je me réjouis que soit réaffirmé le rôle de l'OSCE comme force de protection en faveur de la paix et de la sécurité. Mon propos sera centré sur ces mots, ainsi que sur celui de respect. Respect des personnes, respect du droit international dans les conflits. Il en est un qui fait rage à nos portes concernant particulièrement nos pays partenaires de la Méditerranée. Je voudrais revenir sur la situation en Israël et dans la bande de Gaza. Je pense que tous parmi nous avons pris connaissance avec horreur de l'attaque du Hamas contre Israël le 7 octobre dernier. Les terroristes ont frappé en plein événement musical. Pour nous, Français, qui avons subi les attentats du Bataclan, cela veut dire beaucoup. L'acte terroriste du Hamas a déclenché une riposte immédiate d'Israël qui a le droit et le devoir de se défendre. Et un déluge de feu s'est abattu sur Gaza en faisant un champ de ruines, écoles, hôpitaux détruits, les survivants étant poussés sur les routes de l'Exode. Il ne s'agit pas aujourd'hui de dire qui a tort ou raison, mais simplement d'affirmer que les principes du droit international humanitaire prévus dans la 4e Convention de Genève, visant à protéger les populations civiles en temps de guerre, doivent être respectés, les vies humaines préservées, soignées et secourues. Ce pilier essentiel et fondateur du droit international doit être sanctuarisé. L'embrasement de la zone du Proche-Orient nous rappelle que des solutions politiques doivent prévaloir et que la seule solution viable est celle à 2 États afin que Palestiniens et Israéliens puissent pacifiquement y coexister et que nous ne voyions plus des victimes d'un côté et de l'autre massacrées et ne pouvant tout simplement pas vivre dignement sur la terre qui est la leur. Un vœu, celui que la paix OSCE se prononce pour le dialogue en tant que force de réflexion et de proposition pour un avenir beaucoup plus serein. Je vous remercie.
Merci. And the next speaker will be Ville Skinnari from Finland, followed by Andrei Savinuk from Belarus.
Does it work? Madam President, dear colleagues, I first want to thank Armenia, the Prime Minister. It was very interesting to listen to the crossroads of peace concept, and I warmly welcome this kind of a comprehensive idea of including crucial pieces of security under one umbrella. So thank you for this, and I think it's also a message to all of us that don't be naive, but remain the positive attitude when it comes to peacemaking, when it comes to sustainable solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, yes, the international institutions and organizations are in crisis. OSCE represents one of them. But we have to remain confident and even positive that we work on these common solutions at all levels. And therefore, of course, for myself, for Finland, it's so important that at the same time, although we condemn all the violations of international order, we are trying to build up the international collaboration as we know it. But the question remains, Madam President, as you yourself said, how OSCE can help rebuilding the trust, how it could act as a platform of different solutions, how it could work at the regional level, and how it could localize itself and pursue sustainable peace. And big questions can only be solved if other forum starts to deliver. It means that we have to really work once again at the global level in order to be successful. But ladies and gentlemen, it's obvious that there is a strong disarray. We are not agreeing with everything. But one thing remains in diplomacy. We have to respect ourselves and to be able to listen to each other. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Andrei Savinek from Belarus, followed by Mr. Kyriakos Hadiani from Cyprus.
Уважаемые участники Ассамблеи, мы являемся свидетелями начала фундаментальных сдвигов в структуре баланса сил и безопасности Европы и Евразии. Приходится констатировать, что ОБСЕ так и не смогла превратиться в полноценную организацию по безопасности. По мере расширения на восток НАТО укреплялась, в том числе за счет ОБСЕ, которая одновременно все больше и больше маргинализировалась. Сегодня механизмы контроля над вооружениями практически перестали работать. Очевиден сильный перекос в сторону гуманитарного измерения. Эти реалии подменили профессиональный дипломатический диалог на площадке ОБСЕ пропагандой и конфронтацией. Мы по-прежнему видим попытки ряда стран окончательно перекроить форматы сотрудничества и разрушить основополагающий принцип работы ОБСЕ – запрет на обеспечение собственной безопасности за счет безопасности соседа. Белорусская сторона выступает за сохранение ОБСЕ. Но для того, чтобы организация сохранилась, все страны должны на деле доказать свою приверженность этому универсальному принципу. Это очень трудный путь, но он единственно возможный. Это путь восстановления доверия. При этом хочу высказать убежденность, что если консенсусная природа ОБСЕ будет размыта или вовсе уничтожена, то существует большой риск утраты этой организации своей уникальности, а также риск окончательного разрушения ее функциональности. Благодарю за внимание.
Thank you. And the next speaker will be Kyriakos Hadiani from Cyprus, followed by Halil Snopje from North Macedonia.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to express my sincere thanks for the excellent hospitality here in Yerevan. Also, congratulations to you, Madam President, for the actions you have taken in recent months aiming to strengthen peace and stability in this sensitive region. This means effective leadership, and we need it, because we are living in worried times. It is deeply worrying that new and existing crises seem to have become the new normal in our region. The continued failure of respect for international law in both Ukraine, Nagorno-Karabakh, and most recently in Gaza Strip, but also in Balkan area and in the buffer zone in Cyprus, should be of particular concern to us, and we all must resist to this. However, what causes concern is the fact that international organizations fail to uphold international law. Therefore, in these critical moments, we have to ensure the best possible adjustment of the OSCE in order to safeguard and consolidate its relevance and credibility. The OSCE should remain strong and lead a coalition supporting democracy, because exactly today what we are experiencing is the behavior of authoritarian regimes. And in the case of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, there is a political deadlock. Hamas' horrible act of attacking Israel with the aim of destroying it is being condemned and is barbaric. But also barbaric is the use of civilians as a military shield. We clearly condemn Hamas as a terrorist organization unique for its barbarity, and for sure is not a liberation organization as some claim. We condemn everyone who stands by Hamas in any other way. The state of Israel has every right to defend the state and its people. Supporting Hamas means supporting the destabilization of the region. However, we call on Israel in its right to defense to fully ensure the law of war by protecting human lives. Finally, as a special representative on Southeast Europe, I welcome the recent visit of the President of the European Commission to Western Balkans. Her presence in the region underscores the support of the European Union for the integration of these countries with the EU. In this regard, I am planning to visit Bosnia and Herzegovina next month in my capacity as a special representative in order to highlight the importance of regional security and exchange views with high-level officials on domestic, regional developments and regional cooperation. I also want to welcome the ongoing dialogue between Greece and Turkey. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Halil Snopke from North Macedonia, followed by Lilit Minassian from Armenia.
Thank you, Madam President, dear colleagues. In the 21st century, the international and European context has never been so worrying. We are living in a challenging time full of tragic events, including Russia's relentless aggression in Ukraine, the displacement in Armenians from Nagorno-Karabakh, and the conflict in Israel and the Gaza Strip. The latter is approaching its second month, resulting in an alarming number of victims, pain and suffering. Of course, all these revivals of war put the world at an unprecedented risk of derailment into the darker aspects of humanity. Meanwhile, as you know, closer to the European Union, another act of aggression has taken place. It happened on September 24th in Kosovo. The northern part of the territory was attacked by a well-armed group of paramilitary terrorists who were trained, equipped and financed by Serbia. A fact that has been proven by a series of evidence discovered after the attack. Thanks to the professionalism of the police forces, Kosovo has managed to avoid an uncontrolled escalation, which was the goal of the paramilitary criminal group controlled by Belgrade. This terrorist attack proves that today there are forces that aim to provoke conflicts and armed wars, to undermine democratic authority and credibility, to destroy all stabilizing parameters and the peace won, to redefine borders and impose new rules of order. In the Western Balkans, we have destabilization efforts in a rotating manner in Bosnia, Montenegro and Kosovo, plus the issue of North Macedonia regarding the start of negotiations in EU. So, all the neighbors of Serbia that are not part of the EU, I want to focus on the geopolitical situation because the Balkan countries, which includes my country, have no other alternative than the European Union. Unfortunately, there are countries that do and think differently. This makes the situation much more difficult. We cannot remove the suspicion that these destabilizations in the Balkans can be used by others to distract and divert attention from their own aggressions, such as Russia's aggression in Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Lilit Minassian from Armenia, followed by Helga Smith from OSCE.
Dear colleagues, welcome to Armenia. Hope you will enjoy the hospitality of our country. We have all gathered here to discuss the role of the OSCE in conflict regions. Having repeatedly spoken about the threats of wars, their consequences, the growing alarming phenomena prevailing in the world, we as parliamentarians have emphasized the importance of peaceful solutions and dialogue, referring to the Helsinki Act. But the reality is becoming more and more cruel. Sometimes there is an impression that the speech of politicians in the world, the diplomatic language and the existing systems have lost their power. The future is becoming more and more uncertain. New crisis points are born and gaining momentum, and the number of victims of war is increasing day by day. I will try to talk about the other side of the war with a few examples. It seems governments of the countries don't see and don't listen that side closely. War is about human lives. I want to tell you the story of Kamo, a 30-year-old man who loves his country and compatriots more than his life. Kamo went to fight in 2020 in Nagorno-Karabakh. Kamo didn't die, but they didn't come back from the fight. In his night dreams, Kamo is on the battlefield, collecting in a bag the body relics of his friend who died in a shell explosion. Kamo lived on top of the mountain for 12 days without water or bread because the mountain was surrounded by the enemy. Let me tell you the story of Grandma Elmira. Elmira is a 62-year-old woman. On September 19, the family managed to escape from the village, which was attacked by the Azerbaijanis. Grandmother Elmira did not make it. They took her prisoner. They kept her in the basement for 6 days, torturing, scaring, and beating the old woman. The Red Cross was able to save her. We met Elmira in Goris. She was looking for the children with wet eyes, and the children knew that the grandmother was no longer alive. Let me tell you about 13-year-old Gor. On September 19, when the people were running away from Nagorno-Karabakh, Gor decided to take his family out by a car. The 13-year-old boy drove his 8-member family to Armenia for 55 hours. During 55 hours, they neither slept nor ate. Gor has seen the war in all its colors. I am telling the stories of living people to understand that the ceasefire is not the end of the war. Thousands of people who see the consequences of the bombs cannot live anymore as before. I told you the stories of Kamo, Elmira, Gor, their names could be Ivan, Taras, Suleiman, Kamel, Zaida, Abdul, John, Emily. War is about human lives. It is the duty of all of us, politicians, to see the suffering of these people, to hear the cry of their souls. All our humanity is crying out for peace today. We should not continue to talk about the right of or wrong sides of the conflicts. We must force the world to stop the cannons, the violence, the hatred. Delayed weddings are made, and the children that will be born are few. But they believe that oil and gas is ultimately not more expensive than their lives. Today, peace is mandatory. Thank you.
Thank you. I will next give the floor to Ms. Helga Smith to be able to respond to a question earlier posed by Mr. Coles. And thereafter we will continue with the list, and thereafter will be Björn Söder from Sweden.
Thank you very much. I had indeed asked to take the floor again to respond. And the question was, why do I remain confident that we will find a solution in Skopje? And my answer is very simple, because we need to find a solution, because we owe this to our staff. And this is not only the staff in the Secretariat, that's the staff that works in the institutions, in the field missions, that do excellent work day in and day out. I used my speech in the beginning to really showcase the excellent work done across the 3 dimensions. And and as also I'm the Chief Administrative Officer of this organization. The executive structures have their separate mandates, but I have a duty of care vis-à-vis everyone. And I'm not sure if you know that in some of our field missions, we can only pay 60% of the UN salary scale, because we do not have the money. And this is not only because the budget is being politicized, this is also because we have had 10 years of consecutive zero nominal growth. So I have good colleagues that are leaving. You cannot blame them. They need to feed their families. But I have so many good colleagues that remain. Some of them have worked for 20, 30 years for this organization. They are proud to work for this organization. And I think, and they truly embody the comprehensive approach to security this organization stands for. This is why I remain confident. This is why we have to find a solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary General. We now go further on the list. Mr. Söder from Sweden, followed by Sokratis Famelos from Greece.
Thank you. Madam President, dear colleagues, we have for a long time faced increasing troubling times with Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, Hamas' terrorist attack against Israel, and Azerbaijan's ethnic cleansing of Nagorno-Karabakh. The violence against innocent people and children seems to have no end. These various attacks and wars have to be condemned, and we need to act accordingly. One war, attack, or military conflict cannot distract from another. All aggressions, especially those where civilians are targeted, have to be deplored. Whenever violations of international law are seen, thorough investigations must be conducted. We as parliamentarians and members of the OSCE PA need to make sure that these conflicts receive equal time on our agenda and that no aggressions are forgotten in light of discussions regarding another. The OSCE must continue to stand up for the right of Ukraine, not only to defend its people, but also to take back its entire territory. I will also address two other and urgent matters. Israel has every right to defend its citizens and its territory. The disgusting acts of terror by militant Islamists cannot be condemned enough. Let us be clear, this Assembly stands united with Israel, one of our partners for cooperation. In the aftermath of the terror attacks, we shall also be grateful for participating states within the OSCE that sends a clear and loud message that support of terror organizations never will be accepted. The action taken in Germany to prohibit pro-terror propaganda and meetings will hopefully be followed by many more. Lastly, being here in Yerevan shows a sincere and true commitment from us for all those who had fled from the Azerbaijani aggression on Nagorno-Karabakh. The acts of war must be condemned, such as the lack by foreign troops we saw in keeping the Lachin corridor safe and open. It must be condemned. We need to stand with the people who have lost family members, relatives and friends, because as parliamentarians of the OCPA, we have a duty to uphold the founding principles of the Helsinki Act and safeguard human rights, not only in words, but also in finding real solutions in fighting evilness whenever it occurs. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker will be Sokratis Famellos from Greece, followed by Mr. Johan Buser from Sweden.
Thank you. Dear President, dear colleagues, first of all, many thanks to the organizers and our Armenian friends. Dear colleagues, conflicts in our neighbor are escalating, and the institutions of multilateral diplomacy that we have built to prevent war and promote peace are in deep crisis. OSCE is probably faced with one of the worst moments of history. It's now more important than ever that we all do our part in stepping our efforts to strengthen all dimensions of security, including human rights and the rule of law. That's why I believe that our country, Greece, also our organization, as well as other countries, could do much more towards the ceasefire in the Ukraine or Gaza for supporting populations that are faced with conflicts, such as in Nagorno-Karabakh. That's why our government, Syriza, tried the best to resolve the name issue with North Macedonia to unlock the European perspective of the Western Balkans. And that's why we decide as a party to strengthen our representative in OSCE and the Council of Europe, because we believe to support the bilateral and multilateral diplomacy is the base that we have to solve problems with international law, and the only path is the peace and security. And we believe that the lack of international and particularly European leadership in the struggle for actions, not works, for peace and democracy has a high cost for tens of thousands of people in Ukraine, in Israel, in Gaza, and in Nagorno-Karabakh. We need a clear message, not only against the illegal invasion of Russia in Ukraine, but for the ceasefire and peace on the basis of international law. In the Middle East, it's not enough to condemn the terrorist attack of Hamas and speak about humanitarian law. We need to stand with UN Secretary General in supporting an immediate ceasefire in Gaza to open the way for peace and return of hostages. In your region, it's not enough to support a sustainable peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan in the framework of the Brussels process. We must condemn the Azerbaijan attack and ensure that peace is built on the basis of full respect of the territorial integrity of Armenia, with guarantees on the rights and safety of the Armenian population, including those who wish to return to their homes, and protection of Armenian cultural heritage moment. Dear colleagues, today more than ever, we must support a new global peace movement, both in streets but on diplomatic level also, to press leaders and governments in this direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the next speaker will be Johan Buser from Sweden, followed by Mr. Andre Coelho Lima from Portugal.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, the developments for civilians in Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank are deeply worrying. My thoughts go out to everyone who has lost family members, friends, and loved ones, and everyone who has family, relatives, and friends in Israel and Palestine. Any loss of civilian life is a tragedy. I condemn in the strongest terms Hamas' brutal and indiscriminate terrorist attacks in Israel on the 7th of October. There is nothing that can defend them. The attacks were carefully planned with the intention of harming, killing, and intimidating the Israeli civilian population as much as possible. Over 200 Israelis were kidnapped and taken to Gaza. It is a terrible, reckless act, and Hamas must immediately and unconditionally release all hostages. Israel has a self-evident right to defend itself in accordance with international law and try to save the Israelis who have been taken hostage. Israel has a duty in accordance with international law to ensure the protection of civilian lives. The Palestinian people should not be punished for Hamas terrorist acts. It is with deep concern that we now see how the humanitarian situation in Gaza is rapidly deteriorating. The civilian population is suffering greatly, and we get reports that thousands of people, many of them children, have died so far. I call upon the OSCE PA to work for continued, rapid, safe, and unhindered humanitarian access through humanitarian corridors. This requires an immediate cessation of the fighting so that aid can arrive. I am critical of the fact that many OSCE countries abstained from voting when the UN General Assembly at the end of October adopted a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Civilians must be protected. Access to food, water, medical care, fuel, and shelter must be guaranteed. I also welcome the fact that the ICC is investigating whether war crimes have been committed in Gaza and in Israel over the past month. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Mr. André Coelho Lima from Portugal, followed by Mr. Guillaume Defoe from Belgium.
Thank you, Madam President, dear colleagues. The topic of this session today is, quote, the OSCE's role in an era of conflict, end of quote. So my question is, what is OSCE's role if not in an era of conflict? Defending democracy, defending human rights, defending the rule of law. Of course, we wish not to have conflicts between member states. Of course, we should work in order to achieve peace between member states. But our role is especially when there are indeed conflicts, working to end them, working to finish them. So this question is not only, I think, the main question of this autumn session. This is the main question of the whole OSCE's existence. How to deal with conflicts between member states. Do we or do we not vote for having a position on those conflicts? What powers do we have through our parliaments to have a respectable and respected position? What means can we have as an organization of parliamentarians to indeed intervene on solving these conflicts? Which intervention should we have? So this is the question we should debate for the whole session and not only this afternoon. I think this important question is only being made because, if you allow me, OSCE got used to existing without the existence of military conflicts between the member states. OSCE must have a courageous leadership, one that isn't afraid of taking a stand, one that isn't afraid of having a position like our president is doing, being on the ground in Nagorno-Karabakh after Armenians being expelled from their houses and from their jobs. So having a role in an era of conflict was the reason why OSCE was formed in the first place. We should work to achieve peace, but if there isn't peace, this means that there's work to be done for OSCE. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Mr. Guillaume Defoe from Belgium, followed by Mr. Matti Raidma from Estonia.
Merci, chers collègues. La violente guerre d'agression injustifiée de la Russie contre l'Ukraine et le nettoyage ethnique du Haut-Karabakh par l'Azerbaïdjan, ainsi que l'exode terrible des réfugiés, nécessitent que nous agissions fermement pour faire honneur aux valeurs et aux objectifs de notre organisation. Nous devons être et sommes aux côtés des Ukrainiens et des Arméniens. Mais certaines crises extérieures ricochent également dans nos pays. Aujourd'hui, à nos portes, se déroulent des événements d'une extrême gravité qui doivent retenir toute notre attention et qui réclament notre action. Le massacre de civils, d'hommes, de femmes, d'enfants, les attaques contre les hôpitaux et les écoles par Israël en représailles des horreurs indescriptibles de l'attentat terroriste contre des civils innocents par le Hamas sont inacceptables. Si la réponse des démocraties et de ceux qui s'en revendiquent à la barbarie, c'est la barbarie, alors il n'y a plus de démocratie ni d'espoir. Cette guerre se déroule hors de nos frontières, mais elle nous affecte pourtant, car elle divise nos sociétés, dope l'antisémitisme et l'islamophobie chez nous par les adeptes d'inacceptables amalgames, et donc menace notre sécurité intérieure. Nous devons évidemment agir chez nous pour lutter contre la haine. Je fais notamment référence à la résolution sur l'antisémitisme que nous avons adoptée en juillet. Mais nous devons aussi agir sur le plan diplomatique pour stopper cette folie, protéger tous les civils, faire libérer les otages et faire respecter ce qui doit être notre seule boussole, le droit international. Ainsi, nous mettrons fin aux crimes de guerre, à l'occupation, à la colonisation, à l'extrémisme religieux et au terrorisme au Proche-Orient. C'est notre responsabilité d'agir en ce sens maintenant et d'exiger un cessez-le-feu. Je vous remercie.
Merci. And our next speaker will be Matti Raidma from Estonia, followed by Christian Vigenin from Bulgaria.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, I would like to address our today's session topic. 2 words to describe the OSCE role and current status in the highly complicated security situation today are contribution and hope. The contribution that the OSCE makes to the security of our region, and on the other hand, the hope of making a contribution. In fact, there is growing sense that this hoping is becoming as a central concept in describing the OSCE activities, and this is worrying. In an era of conflicts, we have not been able to defend the principles agreed upon when the organization was created. And worst of all, some of our own members are completely against them. My sense at the moment is that OSCE has fallen into the challenge of surviving as an organization in this era of conflict, surviving with its values. At the time when Russia is trying to establish a security order in the region based on his own rules, which has nothing to do with the democratic values, this country is engaged in the total destruction of the normal functioning of OSCE. And unfortunately, our organization's response is, we hope, the better future. It cannot be so, really. It is in our hands and our mission to create the future, not to hope that it will just get better. In conclusion, I would like to confirm that Estonia believes in the important role of OSCE, stands with OSCE, and has strong willingness to contribute to the organization's future. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Christian Vigenin from Bulgaria, followed by Mr. Thanasis Papathanasis from Greece.
Thank you, President. I would like to first thank our Armenian colleagues for their hospitality. They were able, under very difficult political conditions, to welcome us in the best possible way. Secondly, forgive me, but I would express some disappointment that the Secretary General, Helga Schmidt, did not find another 30 minutes to listen to us until the end of this event. She would have heard some good words about OSCE that I'll do now. OSCE is a unique organization with its developed structure of bodies and institutions. During its years of existence, it has exercised strong influence not only on the development of the participating states, but also globally. 1 billion people are behind us and expect us to be as wise as our predecessors and defend peace, security, and I would say to help ensure the very existence of the humankind. OSCE has done that before, and I believe it can do it again. So my plea is to all decision makers, save OSCE. I ask Russia to unblock the organization because its work is in the benefit of each and every citizen of our planet, including all Russians. I'd like to add something. We focus on security in this panel, but there is no security without respect of human rights. Only free people can build lasting peace and security. There is no security without democracy. Only truly democratic states can build cooperation and respect to each other. True democracies do not wage wars against each other. OSCE is especially well positioned and equipped to achieve results in both these areas. Finally, OSCE is the forum for dialogue, but not dialogue for the sake of having dialogue. Dialogue can bring results only if it is based on goodwill, principles, and values. Actually, everything we do will lose its importance if we start making compromises with our values. Let's not do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Thanasis Papathanasis from Greece, followed by Carina Udebrink from Sweden.
Dear President, dear colleagues, I greet in my turn the proceedings of the OSCE summit with the main theme being the promotion of peace and security in the wider Caucasus region. I would like to reaffirm how deeply ingrained the history is between my country, Greece, and Armenia, as well as the common cultural heritage our two peoples have developed over a millennium of coexistence in the broader region of Asia Minor. Also, in addition, I take inspiration from coexistence history and culture to develop my thoughts on how nations with a long history, such as Armenia, should learn from it and be pillars of stability in their region. They should present their cultural maturity as a strong asset in their active diplomacy, promoting respect and adherence to international law. The role of the OSCE is broader and covers a large area of responsibility and action. Its goal is to prevent conflicts and facilitate the sustainable resolution of existing conflicts in cooperation with involved parties and other regional and international organizations such as the UN. The primary tools of the organization are the on-site operations network and the Conflict Prevention Center, responsible, among other things, for the early warning of the OSCE and its member states regarding the possibility of a new conflict. Despite the organization's evolution over the years and the development of diplomatic security keys, crucial for promoting security and stability, there is still a need for empathy. When a cohesive group of nations shares a common understanding of resolving interstate disputes based on international law, actively practicing diplomacy based on our liberal and democratic values, we speak of empathy. It's the ultimate instrument in the hands of every Western nation, and with it we can extend and spread security over every region. Allies share our common values. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Carina Udebrink from Sweden, followed by Radoslav Fogiel from Poland.
Thank you, Madam President, and dear colleagues. A lot has been said. The role of the OSCE today is more important than ever, as we face the greatest challenges since the Second World War and the creation of our organization. We must ask ourselves, would it be possible to form an organization like OSCE today? Could we agree on the principles and commitments that our predecessors and countries set out in the Helsinki Final Act? We are really being tested, and our most important task now is to uphold our values and principles. Let's remind each other that our organization was not formed by people and states because they were of the same mind. Quite the opposite. It was formed to create opportunities for dialogue despite our differences, a platform to meet and address the challenges that are fundamentally common, to ensure and promote peace, security, equality, and safety by working together. These days, it's easy for our minds to be darkened by the events currently occurring in our world. Russia's brutal war against Ukraine is an assault on everything our organization stands for and the very existence of the OSCE. Ukraine's struggle is also a struggle for us, and the world's continued support every moment, every day is crucial for Ukraine. There is also a war in the Middle East between Israel and Hamas, where innocent civilians and many of them children on both sides are paying the highest price with their own lives. Today we see a growing nationalism, populism, racism, and polarization. If we are to avoid the history repeating itself, the responsibility rests heavily on us as decision makers. Our world do not need more demagogues and authoritarian leaders. Instead, we need leaders who are able to build bridges instead of walls. Leaders who are guided by mutual understanding and community. Dear colleagues, we do not need more fine words and declarations. Let us instead honor and realize the ones we already have. What we need now is action. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Radoslav Fogiel from Poland, followed by Ms. Ellen Samin from Belgium.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me start by thanking our Armenian hosts for having us here in beautiful Yerevan. The name of this session is the OSCE's role in an era of conflict. It's a great topic for discussion. And we've been doing it for almost 2 years already. And it's shameful that we didn't come to any conclusion, that we didn't decide that there should be no room in this forum for an aggressive country that breaks international law, breaks the Helsinki Agreement, and attacks a neighboring country. Referring to what my Lithuanian colleague said about countries celebrating independence from Russia, let me extend my best wishes to Latvia on its Independence Day. I represent a country that actually Russia celebrates its independence from. And we have our experience with Russians. As Prime Minister Pashinyan rightly said before, we are unable to build dams in order to prevent future floods. We should be wiser than that, because we can see Russian fingerprints all over the world. It's no coincidence that the atrocities in Israel committed by Hamas serve also Russia's interest. I really appeal to all members of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly to be bold, to be brave, and make the decisions that we all need. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Ellen Samin from Belgium, followed by Ms. Helena Sturkenfeldt from Sweden.
Dear Madam Chair, dear colleagues, a theme that is close to my heart is Nagorno-Karabakh. If you ask me how I see the role of the OSCE in the Azerbaijan attack against Nagorno-Karabakh, against the Christian Armenian people, I'm not very enthusiastic about it. The existence of the Republic of Artsakh hung by a thread for decades. For most observers, the situation in Artsakh was just one of many territorial issues that exist around the world. However, the international community took the easy way out. Economically, Artsakh and Armenia has no value for the West, but ultimately it is also about a geopolitical and moral issue with ethnic and cultural cleansing looming in the air. Every Armenian Christian trace and heritage in Artsakh will be destroyed or has already been destroyed by Azerbaijan. And after the so-called ceasefire on November 2020, Azerbaijan violated the peace treaty almost every day. By using starvation for more than 9 months, Azerbaijan launched its final offensive on the 19th of September. For 120,000 people, there was no choice but an exodus from their home, Nagorno-Karabakh. The Armenians welcomed the citizens from Artsakh with open arms, and I'm very grateful for that. While Armenia is licking its wounds and looking for diplomatic solution by, for example, proposing the crossroads of peace, the country itself is not out of harm's way. I hope that the OSCE and the international community will not remain blind of what Azerbaijan is capable of. Aliyev stays away from any diplomatic and peace talks, steps on the Artsakh flag and lets its troop march through the streets of deserted Stepanakert. Azerbaijan claims 8 border villages in Armenia and is pursuing the Zan-Zegur corridor. I would also like to call here, as my French colleague Ms. Boyel already did, for a stop to the show trials in Baku against former officials of the Republic of Artsakh, of which Ruben Vardanyan is perhaps the best known internationally. Colleagues, it's time to let them return home. Dear colleagues, I conclude. Artsakh will officially cease to exist from January 1st. One nation is not the same as another. One conflict is not the same as the other. What remains now is political symbolism, diplomatic regards, action, and at best moral outrage. But we should do more.
Thank you. Our next speaker on the list is Ms. Helena Sturkenfeldt from Sweden, followed by Ms. Lynn Ruan from Ireland.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, we find ourselves at a crucial moment in history when security is compromised for power and greed. The situation is dire for democracy, for security, for human rights. The Ukraine continues to fight for freedom, and I would very much like to express Sweden's gratitude. We know what's at stake and that the sacrifices that are being made benefits us all. The Ukraine is fighting for us, so thank you. Sweden will continue to support Ukraine in all ways that we can. Terrorism plagues the world, and we must find ways to remain united. These conflicts that we're seeing are not new. They have once again risen up out of the depths of history with a vengeance. It's been made perfectly clear now that something must be done. Something new and withstanding, a security order that will last. Dialogue should never be used to legitimize inefficiency. We must be resolute in our conviction. The Russian aggression will not be accepted. Terrorism will not be accepted. Ethnic cleansing will not be accepted. Let us be done with discussing the nuances and the details. It is in this context that Sweden is working to join NATO, and it's not a coincidence that we've decided to take this step at this point in time. We have finally woken up from the hard truth that we are not safe in our region and that our neighbor to the east is not to be trusted. NATO's goal is to preserve peace and security in its member states. We wish to contribute to that. The ratification of Sweden's membership in NATO will mean an increased capacity in the Baltic region and in the Arctic. In conclusion, I'd like to thank the member states that have already ratified our application. We thank you and we ask for your continued support. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker on the list will be Lynn Ruan from Ireland.
Thank you, President. A Washington Post analysis shows that the Israeli bombing campaign in Gaza is killing children at a rate unprecedented in the 21st century conflict. In Gaza, at least 5,000 children have been killed in 1 month. It is the opinion of UN special rapporteurs, legal scholars, respected journalists, and countless civil society and humanitarian organisations that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. There is a confirmed evidence of Israel using illegal phosphorus bombs on civilian areas, targeting and assassinating journalists, hospitals, UN workers and healthcare workers, and committing the war crimes of collective punishment and forcible transfer against the people of Gaza. Internal Israeli government documents reveal plans for the ethnic cleansing of Gaza by forcing its residents into Egypt, and statements by officials have openly acknowledged their plans to eliminate everything in Gaza and take control of the area. There is no doubt about what is happening, and anyone who claims there is detached from reality. Despite Israel's clear violations of the Geneva Conventions, the international community is failing the people of Palestine. In particular, the US, the UK and European leaders who continue to arm Israel. Israel's war is also a war on international solidarity and on international organisations. Israel has killed over 100 UN RWA workers in Gaza. This is a war crime. In 4 weeks, rule-based international order has been torn to shreds, and in countries like the Global South, they now see more clearly than ever that US and European rhetoric about human rights is utterly empty. Our job is to uphold international humanitarian law and to hold to account any nation which breaches that law. It is impossible to comprehend that after 11,000 civilian deaths in Gaza, this call for a ceasefire has still not been made. European leaders must find the moral courage to issue this call immediately. We must also push for immediate diplomatic and trade sanctions against Israel. Legislators in Europe need to take meaningful action to stop the ongoing genocide in Gaza, and this includes pushing for the breaking of the EU-Israel trade agreement on human rights grounds. Many of our Western leaders' humanity is no longer intact. It is not too late to be completely devoid of it. We call for a ceasefire now.
Dear colleagues, dear friends, thank you all for an enriching discussion. We have now come to an end of the list of speakers, right on time. Every speaker has respected the time frame of 2 minutes, and I think that that is also one way of showing respect to one another. As commented earlier in my speech today, I said that the Ministerial Council will meet in Skopje in 2 weeks. I hope that when you get back to your capitals, you have an opportunity to discuss the role of the OSCE in your parliaments and with your foreign ministry. With this, we close our work today and we will continue tomorrow at 9:30. Thank you, everyone.